The bus stop was almost empty, lit by a single flickering street lamp that hummed against the cold December air. Snow lay in uneven patches on the pavement, trampled by boots long gone. The billionaire sat alone on the metal bench, his tailored coat too expensive for a place like this, yet doing nothing to keep the loneliness from settling into his bones. He had chosen the bus instead of the driver tonight, telling himself it was a way to feel normal, to feel something real on Christmas Eve. The city around him was quiet, most families already gathered around warm tables and glowing trees. He stared at his reflection in the dark glass of the bus shelter, seeing not success or power, but a man who had everything except a reason to smile tonight. His phone buzzed with unanswered messages from board members and assistants, but none from family. He slipped it back into his pocket, breathing out slowly, as if the cold could carry away the ache in his chest. That was when he noticed the boy standing a few steps away, no more than 7 or 8 years old, bundled in a thin jacket that had clearly seen better winters. The child's shoes were worn, the soles almost smooth, and his gloves didn't match. Snow clung to the hem of his pants as if he'd been walking for a long time. Beside him stood a woman, tired eyes, holding a paper bag close to her chest like it contained something fragile. They didn't look homeless, just forgotten. The billionaire glanced away at first, instinctively guarding his privacy, but something about the boy's quiet stillness pulled his attention back. The child wasn't whining or restless. He was staring up at the sky, lips moving slightly, as if counting stars or whispering a wish he wasn't sure anyone would hear. The wind gusted, and the boy shivered. The billionaire stood, shrugging off his own coat without thinking, then hesitated. Years of boardrooms and negotiations had trained him to calculate every move. Yet this wasn't business. This was something else. He cleared his throat, unsure how to bridge the gap between their worlds. Before he could speak, the boy turned and looked straight at him, eyes wide but not afraid. There was a seriousness there, an old soul heaviness that didn't belong on such a young face. The woman noticed too late, her shoulders tensing protectively. But the boy smiled, small and polite, the way children do when they've learned not to ask for much. "Mom said Santa forgot us again," the boy said softly, his voice almost lost in the wind. He said it like a fact, not a complaint, as if he had already accepted it. The words landed harder than any insult the billionaire had ever received. Again, that single word echoed in his mind, hinting at other Christmases just like this one. The woman's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and she gently touched the boy's shoulder, murmuring his name. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, eyes downcast. "He doesn't mean," but the billionaire raised a hand, stopping her. He wasn't offended. He was shaken, because for the first time in years, someone had spoken to him without knowing who he was, without expecting anything. That's tough," he said, the words feeling clumsy in his mouth. He crouched slightly so he was closer to the boy's height, ignoring the cold seeping through his trousers. "Did Santa forget you, or is he just running late?" The boy thought about this, brow furrowing in concentration. "Mom says he's busy," he replied. "But busy people usually don't come back." The honesty was sharp and clean, cutting straight through the billionaire's practiced charm. He felt something twist in his chest, a memory surfacing of his own childhood Christmases, spent mostly alone in a mansion too big to feel warm, parents absent even when they were physically present. The bus stop clock ticked loudly in the silence between them. The woman shifted her weight, clearly eager for the bus to arrive and carry them away from this uncomfortable moment. The billionaire glanced at the paper bag she held. Inside, he could see the corner of a cheap loaf of bread and a carton of milk. "Christmas dinner, perhaps. Where are you headed tonight?" he asked gently. The woman hesitated, then answered, "My sister's. It's a long ride." She tried to smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. The boy looked up at his mother, then back at the billionaire, as if weighing whether adults ever really listened. "What did you ask Santa for?" the billionaire asked, surprising himself with the question. The boy's face lit up for just a second before dimming again. "A red bike," he said. "Not a new one, just one that works." He shrugged, as if apologizing for wanting something so big. The billionaire nodded slowly, committing the words to memory. A bike, something so small in his world that it barely registered, yet so enormous in this child's. He stood up, suddenly feeling the weight of all the choices he'd made in life, the deals that had earned him billions but cost him moments like these. The bus headlights appeared in the distance, growing brighter. The woman sighed with relief. The billionaire felt a strange panic, like time was slipping through his fingers. He reached into his wallet, then stopped. Money felt too easy, too impersonal. He wanted to do something that mattered. "Listen," he said, addressing the woman. "It's cold. Would you mind if I waited with you a bit longer? I've got nowhere important to be." She studied him, suspicion and exhaustion battling in her eyes, then nodded. The boy grinned, sensing something different, something hopeful, even if he didn't know why. As the bus pulled up and the doors hissed open, the billionaire made a decision that would later shock his entire board of directors. "Actually," he said, "how about we don't take the bus?" The woman stiffened. "I'm not asking for anything," he added quickly. I have a car nearby. I could drive you. Faster. Warmer." Silence stretched. Finally, the woman looked at her son, then back at the stranger. Perhaps it was Christmas. Perhaps it was the way he looked at the boy, not with pity but respect. She nodded. The car was nothing like the bus stop. Warm leather seats, soft lights, the faint scent of pine from a tiny tree hanging on the mirror. The boy pressed his nose to the window, eyes wide as the city lights blurred past. "Is this Santa's car?" he whispered. The billionaire laughed quietly, a sound that surprised even him. "Something like that," he replied. The woman relaxed slightly, hands unclenching in her lap. For the first time that night, the billionaire felt useful, not as a CEO or investor, but as a human being doing a simple, decent thing. Halfway through the drive, the billionaire made a call. Short, precise. "Find an open store," he said. "Bikes. Red, if possible." He hung up before questions could be asked. The woman watched him, confused. "We're just going to my sister's," she reminded him. He nodded. "Of course," he said. With one small stop, the boy bounced slightly in his seat, sensing adventure. The billionaire caught his reflection in the mirror, seeing a spark in his own eyes that he hadn't seen in decades. The store was nearly empty, fluorescent lights buzzing over aisles of forgotten holiday decorations. The boy walked slowly, afraid to touch anything, as if it might disappear. When he saw the bike, his breath caught. It wasn't new. It had a small scratch on the frame. But it was red. Perfect. Is that one taken?" he asked. The billionaire shook his head. "Not anymore." The boy didn't scream or jump. He just stared, tears quietly filling his eyes. His mother covered her mouth, turning away so they wouldn't see her cry. Outside, snow began to fall harder, thick flakes catching in the streetlights. The bike barely fit in the trunk, but the billionaire didn't care. As they drove again, the boy rested his head against the seat, exhausted and happy. "I think Santa found us," he murmured. The billionaire swallowed, blinking hard. "Yeah," he said, "I think he did." He dropped them off at the sister's apartment, helping carry the bike inside. There were hugs, thank yous, promises that felt too small for the moment. Back in the car, alone once more, the billionaire sat without starting the engine. The silence felt different now. Fuller, warmer. His phone buzzed again, but this time he didn't ignore it. He opened his calendar and canceled meetings, flights, obligations. Christmas, he realized, wasn't something you scheduled. It was something that happened when you showed up. He looked at the falling snow and smiled, genuinely, for the first time in years. The next morning, news would spread quietly. Anonymous donations, unexpected gifts, a billionaire seen volunteering instead of vacationing. But none of that mattered as much as the memory of a boy at a bus stop, telling the truth without bitterness. A truth that cracked open a heart long sealed by success. The billionaire drove home slowly, letting the city wake up around him, knowing that while Santa might forget sometimes, people didn't have to. And that realization, more than any deal or dollar, was the greatest gift he'd ever received. He reached his empty penthouse as dawn painted the sky pale pink, the city below stirring with Christmas morning life. The rooms were silent, but no longer cold. He placed a small ornament he'd bought at the store on the counter, a red bike charm meant for a tree he didn't have. He smiled at the thought of the boy waking up, running to the window, checking that the bike was still there. That image filled the space inside him that money never could. Later that day, he would visit a shelter, then another, not for cameras or praise, but because he finally understood something simple. Being forgotten hurts less when someone chooses to remember you. He wrote a note to himself, a rare thing for a man who relied on assistance: never pass the bus stop. It was a promise, not a reminder. Across town, the boy rode his bike in small, careful circles in the snow-dusted courtyard, laughing each time the tires crunched. His mother watched from the doorway, heart lighter than it had been in years. She didn't know the man's name, only that he'd listened. Sometimes, that was enough to change everything. The city carried on with its celebrations, unaware of the quiet miracle that had happened between concrete and cold steel. No angels sang, no headlines appeared, just a simple act of kindness echoing outward, unseen but powerful. The billionaire, once lonely at a bus stop, was lonely no longer, not because he gained a family, but because he found a purpose. And somewhere deep inside, a little boy's words continued to echo, not as sadness, but as a reminder. Santa doesn't forget, sometimes he just looks different than we expect. The billionaire would think of that night often, especially when life tried to pull him back into old habits. Whenever he felt the familiar emptiness creeping in, he remembered the cold air, the flickering light, and a child brave enough to speak the truth. Years later, he would fund bike programs, shelters, and scholarships, but he always knew where it started. Not in a boardroom, not in a bank, but at a bus stop, on Christmas night. The lesson stayed simple, even as his actions grew bigger. Kindness doesn't need an audience. It just needs a moment. That Christmas changed 3 lives, though only 2 of them ever met again. And sometimes, that's how the best stories work. Because miracles don't always come wrapped in ribbons. Sometimes, they come wrapped in honesty. And sometimes, the loneliest people are the ones most ready to listen. So if you ever find yourself waiting at a bus stop, feeling unseen, remember this. One conversation can rewrite everything. On that cold Christmas night, Santa didn't forget anyone. He just arrived on foot, carrying a heart that finally remembered how to give.